You know, one of the biggest myths in marketing is that a big sale needs a huge, high-pressure pitch. We think we have to overwhelm a skeptical buyer to get them to say yes. But what if that's completely wrong? What if the real battle is won not with a sledgehammer, but with a subtle, gentle guide? Well, today we're diving deep into the science of attention pathing, which is really the art of controlling exactly what your audience sees and in what order. This isn't about making your ads look prettier. No, this is about making them work predictably every single time. So get ready to rethink basically everything you thought you knew about how to persuade someone with an image. Let's just start right here and let this idea sink in for a second. Conventional wisdom, right? It tells us that a big commitment needs a massive sales pitch. You know the drill, a relentless barrage of features, benefits, and urgent buy now tactics. But what if that whole approach is actually backfiring? What if the key to winning isn't how forcefully you argue, but how elegantly you guide their attention? That's the core problem we are going to solve today. And this really gets to the heart of it. What if the whole thing is decided not with some big final decision, but with a tiny, almost unnoticeable yes right at the start? Now, this isn't just a sales trick. It's a fundamental principle of how our brains work. See, that little yes kicks off this powerful need inside us to stay consistent. It's like starting a small current. Once we agree to something small, we feel this internal pull to keep our actions in line with that first decision. You're not pushing them anymore. They're pulling themselves forward. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to unravel what I call the persuasion paradox. Then we'll face our main enemy, the chaos of viewing. After that, I'll show you the solution, the Sequential Visual Lock, and we'll learn exactly how to build it by engineering visual flow. Then I'll give you a super practical mastery framework, and we'll finish up with the final conversion path. Let's get into it. Okay, first things first, let's completely take apart this illusion of the big pitch. We've all been trained to think that sales is about overpowering a customer with logic and features, but the most powerful force in any decision isn't coming from the outside. It's that internal need to be consistent. It's really all about self-persuasion. And that whole process kicks off with a simple, almost sneaky psychological tool that taps right into that deep human need. And here it is, the foot in the door technique. And you've seen this in your own life, I guarantee it. Let's say you ask a neighbor to water your plant for a weekend. Well, guess what? They are way more likely to agree to watch your dog for a whole week later on. Why? Because that first tiny yes changes how they see themselves. They start thinking, oh, I'm the kind of person who's a helpful neighbor. In advertising, that first yes can be as simple as getting them to follow a path with their eyes. So let's be super clear about this. Our goal is not to get one huge, scary decision. We're actually architects, building an inevitable conclusion. Every small yes, every piece of information they see in the exact order you designed, it all builds a rock-solid case inside their own head. So the final purchase doesn't feel like a big leap, it just feels like the obvious next step. It's consistency, not coercion, that's really driving the sale. Okay, so if our mission is to guide people down this path of small commitments, we first have to defeat the #1 villain of all online advertising, the absolute chaos of just viewing. You know, most ads don't fail because the copy is bad. They fail because the message never even gets through. It's just lost in this storm of visual noise that is our daily digital life. Just picture it for a second. Someone's scrolling through their feed. They stop on your ad. What happens next isn't some calm, thoughtful process. Eye tracking studies show us it's a frantic, panicked dance. The eye jumps from the image to the logo to the text back to the image. It's like a pinball machine. There's no clear pattern. And in the middle of all that chaos, your beautifully crafted sales argument just disappears. All this randomness creates the real killer of your ad, something called cognitive load. The easiest way to think about it is your brain's working memory is like a small desk. If that desk is totally cluttered with the job of just figuring out where to look, there's absolutely no room left to process what you're looking at. Our brains are built to conserve energy, so if something feels like too much work, it just gives up and moves on. And really, this slide lays out the choice we have to make. High cognitive load, that's a recipe for total disaster. Confusion, people missing your call to action, and basically just throwing your ad money down the drain. But if you intentionally design for low cognitive load, you create this beautiful, clear runway for your message. It is processed without any effort, and taking action becomes not just possible, but actually likely. This isn't some tiny tweak. It is the fundamental difference between an ad that works and one that fails. So the big question is, how do we fight back against this chaos? How do we actually take control of where someone looks and get rid of all that mental strain? Well, the answer is this really elegant, powerful system for engineering attention itself. It's called the Sequential Visual Lock. The Sequential Visual Lock is built on 3 pillars, and you can't skip any of them. First, you need attraction. You have to grab the eye with a single, powerful visual anchor. Think a human face or a really high-contrast object. That's the front door. Second, you need direction. You use visual cues to create a flow, a pathway that forces the eye to move from that anchor to your next piece of info. And third, you guide them to conversion. The path always has to end at one place, your call to action. And this right here, this is the secret sauce. We're changing the game from passive viewing, like a billboard people just glance at, to active information acquisition. It's like we're giving them a guided tour. We're taking them by the hand, visually, and walking them through our argument in the exact order we want them to see it. They're not just seeing your ad anymore, they are actively processing it. Okay, theory is great, but let's get tactical. How do we actually build this visual flow? Well, it all comes down to using a specific set of tools. These are the instruments we use to command the eye to get rid of all the guesswork and crush that cognitive load we were just talking about. So we have 2 types of tools in our toolbox. On one hand, you have explicit cues. Think of these as the sledgehammers. Literal arrows, numbered steps, really strong lines. They're impossible to miss. But then you have the scalpels, implied cues. These are way more subtle, but they can be even more powerful. Things like the gaze of a person in your ad looking right at your headline, or the perspective lines in a photo that naturally funnel the eye towards your button. The best designs, they blend both perfectly. Now, for the grand finale of our guided tour, the conversion element. We have to make sure it's not just easy to see, but that it's absolutely unmissable. And for that, we use a powerful, hardwired brain hack called the isolation effect. Basically, our brains are automatically programmed to notice, focus on, and remember anything that breaks the pattern, the thing that stands out from the crowd. I mean, just look at the screen right now. Where did your eye go first? I'm willing to bet it went right to that highlighted line. You didn't even have to think about it. Your brain was just pulled there because it's different. That is the isolation effect in action. So by making your call to action button a totally unique color or size or shape, you're using this neurological shortcut to guarantee it's the final stop on the tour. So we've covered the why and the what. Now let's get to the how. I'm going to give you a simple, actionable checklist that you can use to audit your own ads the second this is over. This is how you go from just understanding attention pathing to actually mastering it. Here is your 3-step audit. Step 1, map the flow. Ask yourself, does the eye naturally move from my main visual to my proof to my call to action? If not, it's broken. Step 2, engineer the cues. Are you actually using explicit or implied cues to guide the eye, or are you just hoping people figure it out? Because hope is not a strategy. And third, isolate the CTA. Is your button the single most visually distinct thing on the screen? It absolutely has to be. And that brings us to the core idea, the big philosophy behind this whole system. It's about a massive shift in how you think. You need to stop trying to persuade and start building a pathway. Stop shouting your message and start drawing a map for the eye. Look, it really boils down to this. If you leave attention up to chance, you are going to get random, unpredictable results. It's like tossing a handful of seeds in your backyard and hoping a garden grows. But if you systematically engineer a visual pathway, you ensure predictable processing. You're no longer gambling on whether your ad will be understood, you're guaranteeing it. And we'll end on this thought. The best marketing doesn't shove people through a funnel, it pulls them toward value. And you do that not by being louder, but by creating a visual journey that is so clear, so easy, and so compelling that reaching the end feels like their own idea. You win because you literally draw the path to conversion right there on the screen for them to follow.